Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. If you've been scrolling through the news lately, you've probably seen that the situation in Pakistan-administered Kashmir has escalated incredibly fast. We're talking major disruptions, strict travel advisories, and tragically, a real loss of life. But to truly grasp what is unfolding on the ground right now, we need to move way beyond just the headlines. So let's systematically break down the complex triggers, the key players, and the very specific political demands that are driving this massive wave of unrest. So you're probably asking yourself the same question everyone else is. Why are we seeing this huge surge in mobilization and severe clashes with authorities at this exact moment? Well, it's actually a really potent mix. We're looking at highly localized legislative disputes colliding with deep-seated economic grievances, all capped off by some sudden severe government crackdowns. Look, to understand the true gravity of the current situation, we have to start with the immediate human toll. Just recently, during clashes between police and protesters in Ralakot City, that's the capital of the Poonch district, 11 people lost their lives. According to the regional commissioner, Sardar Wahid Khan, this included 4 police officers, 6 protesters, and 1 passerby. And all of this violence erupted right before a major demonstration planned by civil society groups was even supposed to kick off. And it doesn't stop there. The sheer scale of the chaos is really reflected in the injuries, with over 70 individuals hurt. Now, that number is highly significant because it's not just one-sided. It comprises both protesting citizens and security officials. The local police chief specifically noted that 23 security officials and 50 protesters were among the injured in these Sunday clashes alone. The response to this was massive. Authorities deployed federal paramilitary troops, issued strict advisories urging all visitors to leave immediately, and completely cut off internet access across the region for days. It was a real lockdown. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is the stark contrast in perspectives. If you ask the two sides on the ground how the violence broke out, you get 2 totally different stories. On one side, you have the Jammu Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee, or the JAC. This is a grassroots umbrella group for traders and civil society, led by an activist named Shaukat Nawaz Mir. Mir actually released a video accusing the state of starting a literal massacre of their people in Ralakot. But on the exact opposite side, the local government commissioner flatly rejected that. He stated the JAC leadership is just misleading the masses, and that the state's actions were strictly meant to restore law and order after miscreants shot at the police. Okay, before we dive any deeper into the politics of this, let's zoom out for just a second and define exactly where this is happening. The disputed Himalayan region of Kashmir is claimed in full by both India and Pakistan, but the specific area we are analyzing today is Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Locally, it's known as Azad Jammu and Kashmir, or AJK. It operates under the semi-autonomous system. It actually has its own prime minister, its own president, a legislative assembly, and its own courts. However, ultimate authority on the big stuff, defense, foreign affairs, currency, that all rests with Islamabad. And according to the 2017 census, we're talking about a population of over 4 million people here. Geographically speaking, the absolute defining feature here is the line of control. This is a 740-kilometer, or roughly 459-mile, highly militarized border. It physically separates the specific population in AJK from the Indian-administered territory of Kashmir. It's the physical reality that shapes literally everything about the region's governance and its international status. And, as you'll see in a minute, this ties directly into the current protests. So, what lit the match for all of this recent tension? Elections. The region is gearing up for incredibly high-stakes elections on July 27th, where voters will elect their next legislature. The entire assembly consists of 45 seats in total, but it's the specific allocation of just 12 of those 45 seats that has completely ignited this current firestorm. Here is where it gets really interesting. Under a constitutional law dating back to 1974, 12 of those assembly seats are strictly reserved for refugees who migrated from Indian-administered Kashmir way back in 1947 and now live in other parts of Pakistan, like Karachi, for example. The catch? If a refugee actually lives inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir, they cannot contest these reserved seats. The JAAC is stepping up and demanding the total abolition of those 12 seats. They're arguing essentially that every single seat in the legislature must go to people who actually live within the borders of AJK today, not to constituencies scattered across the rest of Pakistan. Now, this didn't just happen overnight, right? To really understand why it's boiling over now, we have to look at how these protests rapidly evolved over the last 3 years. It all started back in May 2023. Residents were protesting skyrocketing electricity bills, widespread flower smuggling, and some really acute shortages in subsidized wheat. Fast forward a year to May 2024. The movement held a massive long march toward Muzaffarabad that unfortunately resulted in violent clashes and 5 deaths. By late 2025, the JAAC formalized their movement into a 38-point charter and initiated a lockdown. And that brings us to June 2026, our current crisis point. Things went from bad to worse just days ago when local authorities officially banned the protest organizers. On the Friday right before this recent wave of violence, the government's Home Department issued a circular prescribing the JAAC under the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2014. They basically accused this grassroots group of engaging in terrorism, acting against the peace and security of the state, and creating anarchy by promoting hatred and insecurity among the public. And then, a recent Supreme Court ruling essentially boxed the protesters into a corner. Just on Sunday, the Supreme Court of Azad Jammu and Kashmir officially ruled that those 12 reserved seats, they are constitutionally protected. They can't just be scrapped without a formal constitutional amendment. As Raja Kaiser Ahmed, a director at Quaid-Azam University, points out, this ruling effectively closed the legal route for the JAAC. Experts note that hitting this legal dead end really intensified the calls for street protests, because the groups felt like they had absolutely no other avenues left to get their demands met. So you might be wondering, why are those seats seemingly untouchable? Why not just change the Constitution and be done with it? Well, journalist Abdul Jabbar Nasir explains the massive geopolitical chessboard at play here. These seats have existed in various forms since the late 1940s to represent the entirety of the Kashmiri refugee population. As Nasir states, abolishing them isn't just a local administrative matter. It literally strikes at the heart of international diplomacy at the United Nations. The international stakes here are just massive. Dismantling that refugee representation could completely alter the delicate geopolitical balance between India and Pakistan over the whole disputed region. Nasser points out that historically, India actually kept seats vacant in its own parliament to assert that they represented the entire former princely state. If Pakistan were to suddenly dismantle its representation for refugees across the line of control, India could easily turn around and argue that both countries have effectively just regularized their control over their current respective sides. That would fundamentally damage Pakistan's long-standing case for wider Kashmiri statehood. But let's be real, zooming out even further, those 12 seats are just the tip of the iceberg. They sit atop decades of deep-rooted economic and governance grievances. Remember that 38-point charter released by the JAC in late 2025? It wasn't just about elections. It included massive demands for economic subsidies to help everyday people, rigorous investigations into corrupt officials, expanded social welfare, and better infrastructure. The whole shebang. The reserved seats issue is really just the political lightning rod for a much wider, deeper dissatisfaction with how the entire region is being run. Now, to be fair, the government pushes back strongly on the narrative that they're just ignoring these wider grievances. The chairman of the Pakistan People's Party, the PPP, which happens to hold the most legislative seats in the AJK Assembly, is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. In a recent news conference, he stated that out of the JAJC's 38 demands, a staggering 35 have already been implemented. He argued that the remaining 3 demands are either practically unfeasible or explicitly barred by court orders. Much like the abolition of those 12 seats we just talked about. So, what does this all mean? Ultimately, what we are looking at is a profound, long-running tension. Raja Kaiser Ahmed summarizes it perfectly. This is a clash between massive international constitutional frameworks that are strictly linked to the broader, historical Kashmir dispute and a local, modern population demanding greater immediate accountability, political participation, and economic relief on the ground right now. It's a tug-of-war between competing visions for the region's future trajectory. I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Think about how a hyper-local legislative dispute might just send shockwaves across the globe. As the July 27th elections approach, and with the JAC now legally banned under anti-terrorism laws, the pressure cooker is only building. Will the strict constitutional protections hold firm, or will grassroots mobilization force a change that alters the decades-old geopolitical stance of the entire region? Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me, and definitely keep your eyes on how these deep-rooted tensions unfold in the coming weeks.